I think two things you may want to think through is one, what sort of business are you in? Or how regulated is the business in? Are you dealing with childcare? Are you dealing with mortgages and loans and sensitive information? Because if you are, there are additional requirements that you have that other companies and industries may not have. So figure out what the industry standards that you're in, and whether or not there's certain criteria, or whether you're a government contractor and there's just certain criteria that will be that you have to worry about that others won't. The second big thing is to think through is marijuana, and because it's a lot of states are now finding that it's that it's legal, whether it's medically legal, recreationally legal. Then the other issue is just trying to find good talent. It's really think to yourself, do I really want to be testing on the front end and about marijuana, because I'm going, because I could be losing some really good folks and talents, forgetting whether or not the state even, finds illegal, because, there are some most of the states have some pretty, decent laws that give employers some leeway on that if they catch someone, who, that with a positive. Though we could have a whole conversation on that and the testing technology and whether it's where it needs to be. But I think you really need to start thinking through. I think companies should think through, is that something that's really important, or is it more important to test on that after a workers' comp injury, or or a reasonable suspicion, and so giving yourself the ability in those situations, but not so much on the screening end on whether or not you're going to employ someone. So in other words, I've been talking to a lot of my clients, and they've kind of landed on a hybrid approach. A lot of clients are not. A lot of companies have decided not to test on the front end. That just, the technology may not be reliable, so they may not be, high when they were at work. They could have smoked maybe a couple months ago. And B, they just, it's kind of like they just don't want to know that. And either if it's a good person who's fit for the job, at the get go, or someone who otherwise is doing something, or someone who's been with the company a long time and doing very well, and then just on a random test gets has a positive. Do you really want to be in that situation? So those are just things to think through. And again, every company is going to have their own way of looking at it. I just know that I've seen a lot more companies starting to not screen on the marijuana standpoint, and you could use other you could take out marijuana and put in other things as well.